What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball because it is the divisional round. Some people say, many people say, it's the best weekend of football for the entire season. And join us to talk a little ball today. It is our guy, Joel Smyth. Joel, what's going on, buddy?
I'm doing good. I was super excited last week, as you were, for that first wild card game. There's lots of good ones, 6 different games, and it paid off. It was 5 out of 6, but everyone kind of could see that Monday night one coming, especially after those 5 great games. So I'd expect more of the same, especially with a lot of these close games and the projections right now.
Yeah, and sometimes with the wild card round, Joel, you got to get rid of the riffraff, because they've expanded it to the seventh. They've expanded it to so many teams now, like that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
This year, it didn't really feel that way. I think the kind of general consensus was that the Steelers were the riffraff and the Panthers were the riffraff. One of those teams delivered. The Panthers gave us, potentially to me, one of the best games of the entire weekend. And the Steelers were riffraff for sure, but they gave us so much to talk about after the fact with Mike Tomlin retiring, whatever you want to call it, that I feel like that was also part of the wild card weekend payoff.
Yeah, totally. 5 great games, but up until that Steelers game, it was at least honestly, it was kind of fun. It was close for a little bit, but the defensive plays, there were some fun ones. And that Steelers defense, even though they allowed 30 points technically, some of that, was the Steelers offense as well. So defense played solid.
No doubt. And we'll be talking about a lot of those teams again this week because we have 4 huge games to preview here for the divisional round. We're going to go game by game. We're going to talk matchups to watch. We're going to talk about props. And speaking of props, Joel, I have to give you props on your props from last week, if we can make sense of that. You went 9-1, 9 picks out of 10 correct on your props last week. I was 6-5, so a respectable Mike Tomlin-esque winning record there for me. But you completely obliterated it, 9-1. So shout out to you, pal, for a great wild card round. The people are going to be expecting you to repeat your performance here on this show.
Yeah, we might regress to the mean a little bit here, so we'll find out. But there's some ones that I really like, so maybe we repeat. Yeah.
No doubt. So let's get into it here, and let's talk about the first game on Saturday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. We've got the 6th seed Buffalo Bills traveling to Denver to take on the number 1 seed in the AFC, Denver Broncos, who are 1.5-point favorites from our friends at BetMGM. We've got a 46-point over-under here. I'm really excited for this game. I'm excited about all of these games. Some of them are a little bit trickier, this will all end up being wrong, but I feel like some are trickier to figure out than some of the others. This one I do think is a rather straightforward game, Joel. Not saying that I'm 100% confident in who's going to win it or anything, but I just think these teams have rather clear identities right now. Specifically Buffalo, when they have the ball, I want to talk about, and I know both of us have some notes on the passing game here because, Joel, I don't know what your 40 time is these days. I'm not sure what you're running in the 3-cone, but they might need you to line up an outside receiver for the Buffalo Bills because they're down Gabe Davis. They're down Josh Palmer. They're down Tyrell Shavers. Curtis Samuel might be coming back off IR. Not sure how much that moves the needle for them. I mean, we know they don't want to play Keon Coleman. They might have to play Keon Coleman here because they just do not have a lot of live bodies in the wide receiver room right now. So when we're looking at this Bills passing game when they have the ball, what do you think we can expect to see on Saturday?
Yeah, if I go in there, I'll probably have to stick in the slot for right now. But I don't know if you saw this stat, Matt. When we're looking at Keon Coleman, Shavers last week, when he was playing in the second half, he had that torn ACL. He played 22 snaps on the torn ACL, and Keon Coleman had 27. So he was out there. But now he's going to have to play more, you'd expect, on that outside. They have nobody in that. And there's a lot of injuries that we'll talk about on the spot. But Buffalo, their receivers, one of the biggest ones in terms of an entire receiver room being decimated. Although probably, not the most important area of their team right now. They don't have the greatest. So I would say that kind of pivots over to the tight ends. Kincaid, back healthy. He had that wild card game where he played the most snaps that he played, or his most routes compared to the amount of dropbacks that Josh Allen had since week 5 of this year. So he had that injury. And then when he did return, he was kind of not playing as much all the way and then got injured again, all the way up until the playoffs. And they finally used him a little bit more. I would say part of that is because of the receiver injuries. So I would say that is the one to watch because when we go by a per route base, with Dalton Kincaid, there's no player better to do it with if we want to talk up a guy. He doesn't really run too many routes compared to your other, like, quote unquote star tight ends, but he is number one basically in every single tight end stat if you go just on a per route basis. Number one in yards per route, number one in fantasy points per route. The only two players in the entire NFL to have better yards per route than Dalton Kincaid this year is JSN and Puka Nacua, two of the best receivers in the NFL. And then Dalton Kincaid is number three. So if he can get, last week he had 56% of the routes. If he can get 65%, 60%, he could be a huge part of this game.
Yeah, it's a great call out here. And I feel like when the Bills have been effective as a passing game, it's because they've been able to get the tight ends rolling here, whether it is Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox is mixed in. Obviously, Jackson Hawes is like a pure blocker for them, and he's been able to really help them as a run blocker and even as a pass blocker at times too when they go to these multiple tight end sets, which is just not like that's a big part of why Kincaid's not ever going to play a ton of snaps. Is he's just not a reliable player in the run game. He's more of a slot receiver type, which I don't love when you have like the tight end who's a pure almost slot guy. You need to be a little bit more dynamic than that, but he is really good as a pass catcher. Like he's kind of developed into the guy that they wanted him to be as that pure downfield guy. I mean, there's no question, Joel, to me that over the course of the season, he's been their most reliable downfield receiver. That's why that yards per route run figure is so high. And when you look at this Broncos defense, it's a good unit. I will say they do give up more passing production on paper than you would probably imagine for one of the better defenses in the NFL, but they're generally really good at defending wide receivers. They're generally really good at defending the run. In terms of adjusted fantasy points allowed, though, during the regular season, they were 25th against tight ends. So they do have you see this sometimes with the good defenses. They'll cede production to the tight end position as they try to really limit big plays on the outside. So it's definitely a potential matchup here to pick on if you're Buffalo in the passing game.
Actually had that marked down too. Like just because not necessarily the Broncos are bad against tight ends. It's just they're so good against the receivers. You got Surtain on the outside there, taking away your wide receiver one normally. Buffalo doesn't really have one. But, more focus, more volume to the tight ends when you're going against this Broncos defense. So it'll be an interesting one to watch. They don't run too much 12 personnelities consistently. They've had a couple like spike games, but for having like three tight ends that they use, it is usually one tight end sets for the most part in Buffalo, but they've had a couple games here and there where they use a lot. Maybe that happens again with all those receiver injuries.
This is what's just so funny about what a kind of goofy build that the Buffalo Bills have on offense is because their best and most reliable receiver is Khalil Shakir, who is, again, a pure slot guy. You can't really kick him. You certainly can't kick him out to play X receiver. He can play flanker in certain looks and if you can get him a free release, but he has a very, I'm not going to call it a limited route tree, but there are ways that he's just not a downfield guy, like kind of period, end of story. He had a big game last week. He averaged, 1.8 air yards per target. So when you're looking at this Broncos defense, I can't imagine that they're going to look at number one receiver on the depth chart in terms of production is Khalil Shakir, and we're going to stick Pat Surtain on him. That doesn't really make any sense to me. The one thing that could kind of potentially limit the explosiveness of Dalton Kincaid is I actually wondered, Joel, if there's going to be times where they say, hey, Pat Surtain, it's a third down play. Go line up against Dalton Kincaid if he is that pure slot player, and just try to take him away, because you kind of saw that when the Broncos played the Raiders at times. They'll do that with Brock Bowers, just cover him with Pat Surtain.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. Do you know like how much Kincaid lines up outside more so compared to like the slot and the natural tight end? I would wonder how much they would move Surtain inside and travel him around compared to, Kincaid's outside, let's get him on right away. Because Shakir, he's always going to be interior. One of the top guys in the NFL in yards after catch, because that's where all of his production's coming from. He's not really getting the ball downfield too often.
So 22.5% of his snaps out wide for Dalton Kincaid this year. That's pretty high for a tight end.
Yeah.
If we're talking about tight ends overall, just looking at just the entire position, like Darren Waller, 44%. That's obviously a massive outlier. He's a former wide receiver. He's huge as Darren Waller. Mark Andrews is second at 25%. Terrence Ferguson is 23%, and then it's Dalton Kincaid fourth most, right ahead of Mike Gesicki there at 23% for Kincaid, 22% for Mike Gesicki. So yeah, that's a pretty decent amount in terms of Dalton Kincaid lining up outside.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to watch for sure.
So, other things to look for when the Bills have the ball, I would say that this has to be one of those. I don't know what you think about Joe Brady as a play caller. I know Bills fans are kind of mixed on him. I generally think he's pretty good OC. I think this has to be a moment where the run game has a better showing than it did against Jacksonville last week, which, by the way, we talked about that last week, that was not going to be a big James
Hmm.
Cook game. It was not a big James Cook game. You look at this past week, he wasn't obviously effective as a rusher, but can they get the screen game going here? Can they get Khalil Shakir involved in the screen game? Can they get James Cook involved in the screen game? I think that has to be a pretty big thing for the Buffalo Bills to focus on against the Broncos defense.
Yeah, I would agree. I was actually just thinking earlier, just like with James Cook in this receiving game, he has the ability. He's shown that even outside of just the screen game, those downfield shots out of the backfield,
Mm-hmm.
he can do it. So it'll be interesting to see how much they involve him because Josh Allen usually doesn't throw to the running backs naturally too much. A lot of scrambling quarterbacks don't. So I would like to see him get more involved in the passing game here.
Last time these two teams played, 23 carries, 120 rushing yards, and a touchdown for James Cook. They certainly need that kind of performance once again for the Buffalo Bills ground game. And if you just look right now, again, the Broncos throw 71% of their passes under 10 air yards. The Bills have generally kind of been that type of team as well. So we could get two kind of dink and dunk offenses here. And let's transition over to that Broncos offense because we were talking about this earlier, Joel. I have some concerns about the Broncos going against this Bills defense in the passing game. But what are you looking at when the Broncos have the ball here?
Yeah, basically just that, the dink and dunk game. How much of that, like, can they just put those long drives together or can they get explosives on the ground? Buffalo, really good passing defense, second best in those explosive passes allowed. Bo Nix is 29th in generating it on a per pass basis. So Buffalo, they're
Mm.
not the greatest on the ground. They allow the second most on the ground, and Harvey, at least in college, more was known as that explosive guy. In the NFL, it hasn't been as much this year in his rookie season, but hopefully they can get some for their sake on the ground because I don't know if this is going to be the day where like it finally comes together for like Troy Franklin's downfield shots. Like Sutton's the really only hope in that explosive passing game right now.
And when you look at the Bills, just defensively on paper, since week 11, I'm going to quote a lot of like since week 11 stats here on the show because I think that kind of gives us a good barometer of what teams are doing lately. 65.3 yards per game allowed to outside receivers for the Buffalo Bills defense, second fewest in the NFL. Like they do not give up a lot of big explosive passing plays to the outside. And we've seen, Joel, like at times, it's like, oh, Troy Franklin, is he taking over as the number one receiver in Denver? To me, it's like, no, he's not. It's just teams are able to take away Cortland Sutton on the outside because Sutton only lines up at X receiver. And we see when you
Hmm.
take away that first read for Bo Nix, he kind of goes into that chaos mode and that feeds these kind of inefficient underneath targets. Even though Franklin can get going downfield, it was a lot of like inefficient underneath stuff for Troy Franklin. And that gives me a pause for this offense specifically because I think you need to generate those explosives to Cortland Sutton. And if you can't get those here against Buffalo, then I start to think like, oh, okay, what are two things that I think Bo Nix really struggles with right now? Number one, throwing against zone coverage. That's generally been his weakness. He's a better man coverage thrower than he is a zone coverage thrower just right now at this point. Two, he
Hmm.
struggles with pressure, especially when he doesn't quite have what he wants on his first read and what he thinks he's going to see pre-snap. And right now, the Bills are just cooking on defense rather quietly in the passing game, kind of rotating coverages. I don't know if that's what I want to see, if I'm Bo Nix and Sean Payton from a matchup standpoint here in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, and you brought up the stat in terms of those outside receivers recently. A couple of those games, they didn't have Christian Benford, so he's back healthy now. He'll play
Mm.
again this week. So that'll help him against Cortland Sutton, that sort of thing. I think it'll be like one of those big time of possession games where, like, you're kind of, if you have a really long drive, either team can do it with their running game, whether it's Harvey or Cook and Allen, and you can add, Bo Nix into that running game. But then if they have that really long drive and the other team kind of maybe goes three and out, and they kind of just keep that control of the possession, keep the control of the game, that sort of thing. That's where it can get dangerous for one of them.
Yeah, no question. This could be one of those games that's over really quickly. It's a lot of rushing attempts on both sides. I like that call out from you in terms of a time of possession type of game here. So let's talk about our props here from this game. Give us your props that you've got your eye on.
Yes, two related to that. Both of them are going to be rushing yards. So RJ Harvey, this has creeped up a little bit. It was at 48 to start the week. It's at 53, which I still don't mind. Harvey, ever since that Dobbins injury, I believe it was week 13 or 12 that he starting, he's averaged 13.7 attempts per game. Buffalo is second in the NFL in forcing more runs than average, just because, one, their rushing defense isn't very good, and their passing defense is. So teams naturally run against them more. So if he got his average 13.7 carries, he wouldn't even need to run for 4 yards per attempt to hit this 3.9. And I think he maybe gets over that 13 attempts, maybe reaches that 16 or 17 and can get 4 yards a carry against this defense. So I like that prop as my number one. Buffalo 29th against running backs on the ground this year. And then on the opposite side, not James Cook, but actually Josh Allen. See his mark at 36.5 in his 14 playoff games in his career. He's crossed this 9 times, averaging 50 yards on the ground. And he doesn't really have receivers, as we've talked about multiple times. I think this is a big day where, in terms of a really good defense, not much help. He kind of goes maybe like a Mahomes mode at the start of the year that we saw with that Worthy and Rashee Rice, where he was scrambling more than anybody in the NFL. Like, this is a playoff game, a road game for him. Does he just run a ton on this Broncos defense and has 10 plus attempts and gets past that 36-yard mark?
I love it. I think both of those were really good. I had a strong feeling you were going to come with an RJ Harvey prop here, so I was going to leave that one for you because I feel like that's the best way to go here. You got to imagine that Broncos offense, they've watched the tape. They know that they can get the ground game going against the Buffalo defense. I'll talk about my props here. One related one is I think Bo Nix under 21.5 completions is a good one here because for some of the reasons that we've talked about, we do expect this to be a time of possession game, maybe fewer plays overall. I also think that we're going to see a lot more rush attempts from Denver here. As you mentioned, I think RJ Harvey's going to have a good game. And secondly, like I said, I don't know that this is going to be one of those efficient Bo Nix passing games because it just doesn't set up that way from a matchup perspective. He struggles when you give him a different pre-snap look than a post-snap look. That's what Buffalo does really well. Much better throwing against man coverage and zone coverage. Some of that is because Cortland Sutton is a pure X and you're going to get more zone coverage looks, but generally I think that's what's given him some trouble. And they've had some times where like Joey Bosa has had really good pass rush looks. That's another thing that Bo Nix struggles with. So I just don't see a really efficient day overall here from Bo Nix. I think they're going to be looking for him to like be more of an out of structure playmaker than more of a matriculate the football down the field. They're going to want to limit opportunities for him to make mistakes against the secondary. And then my one on the Buffalo side here, I think Brandon Cooks over 2.5 receptions at plus 110. I want to give a couple of plus odds ones out here as well. And I feel like for this one, the reality is he's gonna have to play a lot. Like if Joel Smith can't, if he can't suit up for this Buffalo Bills team and play outside, they got enough slot receivers, pal. They don't need you to run any more slot routes. Well, then I guess that's going to have to be Brandon Cooks. And last week, obviously, he played a ton in the game, not like a super, the amount you expect, like 54%. He's got to play way more than 54% of the routes in this one. Riley Moss is a guy who's I think Riley Moss is a good player, but he's given up some big plays. I think Brandon Cooks gets at least 3 catches in this game.
Yeah, I love that one. 2.5 receptions for basically their number one outside receiver is insane, especially when we're talking plus money at plus 110. But yeah, love the Brandon Cooks call out.
All right, who do you think wins this game? I'll tell you, I'm going Buffalo Bills.
I'm going Buffalo too, and they're technically the underdog, like plus 1.5, but I'm going to take Buffalo. I think it's just one of those where I would rather just choose the quarterback here. I like Buffalo's passing defense, obviously the Broncos at home with that defense, but I think it just comes down to I like Josh Allen a lot better than the Bo Nix in this one.
Hey, sometimes it's as simple as that. That's pretty much how I feel as well. Okay, next game up here on Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox here. We've got the 6th seed San Francisco 49ers going against the number 1 seed Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks are 7-point favorites. They're the biggest favorite of the weekend. We got a 45-point over-under here. This one is really fascinating, Joel, especially because this is the 3rd time we've seen these two teams played. And as we were discussing earlier, those matchups between these two teams have been pretty interesting, if we can say that way.
Yeah, it's always hard to predict these ones in terms of even if they play just once or twice in the regular season, these divisional games. When you have three games, we saw this with Chicago and Green Bay last week. It's like, are they going to score a bunch of points or barely any against each other? And it was the former, where it was 31-27, I think. These two games, the first time that they've played, it has not been high scoring in the slightest. Two of their worst offensive games, when we look at Seattle in particular, San Francisco's defense, you kind of want to play him. You're not really scared of him. Seattle, against everybody else in the NFL, they have the number one scoring offense against any other team. When they played San Francisco this year, 32nd ranked scoring offense. For some reason, it's just one of those weird divisional stats.
It's so bizarre, right? Because you'd imagine this is a defense that you can really take advantage of. That being said, I think I feel like I say it every single week, but we've got to give a lot of credit to Robert Saleh, who of course is taking head coaching interviews. He's actually interviewing with the team in this division. I believe tonight the Arizona Cardinals are interviewing Robert Saleh. Robert, come on. You don't need to take the Cardinals job. Okay. Take the interview, fine. But you can be choosy. Like even if you don't take a damn head coaching job in this cycle, just be the 49ers defensive coordinator in another year when you get Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, who's not going to come back for this game. He could maybe come back next week if the Niners win this game. Yeah, those guys back next year? Come on. You be a head coach once again next year. You don't have to worry about it. Don't take that Cardinals job. That thing's a mess. Okay, but for this game, Robert Saleh is really cooking with these guys, and they don't actually give up as much production as you'd think. We'll get to that a little bit later when the Seahawks have the ball, but let's talk about this Niners offense when their defense is going against San Francisco's offense here. This is a tough one to predict, Joel, in terms of what the Niners are going to be on offense. They might have Ricky Pearsall. We don't know yet. They will not have George Kittle. So what can we expect when this offense is on the field for San Francisco and they don't have their all-pro tight end, George Kittle?
Yeah, I feel like we've had a lot of this in the past in terms of a sample size. How do the Niners play without George Kittle the last few years? Just because he's missed a lot of games because of injury, including this year. When we're looking at CMC and Tonjes, they'll get a lot more involved. CMC specifically, that correlation between the running back and tight end targets, 100% there. When Kittle's missing games, CMC gets a lot more targets. And the other thing is just them using more 21 in terms of their personnel, using that second running back, or in this case, a fullback in Kyle Juszczyk, having him play a bit more. After a few games into the season, they were having some problems. George Kittle was still out. They started using Juszczyk a little bit more, and that offense started getting a little bit better. So I'd expect a lot of Juszczyk in this one too.
Yeah, Juszczyk props. That's how you know you're a real sicko. All right, if you on the divisional round, be like, what are my Kyle Juszczyk's props? But I agree. Like I do think he's going to be pretty involved in this one. I wonder, what is your level of optimism about the San Francisco ground game? Because it's been very hit or miss this year. Last time these two teams played, they did not get anything really going from a ground game perspective. And people are hammering the unders on Christian McCaffrey rushing in terms of BetMGM right now. All of the unders are heavily juiced, and it makes sense, right? Seattle is number one in rushing success rate allowed since week 11. They're one of the most difficult teams to run on. So do you have any optimism for the San Francisco ground game getting going here?
It's not very high, I will say. Their run defense right now on a per play basis, success rate, EPA, whatever you use, they are number one. Seventh against the pass, so still pretty good, but number one against the run right now. CMC hasn't played too well against them this year. He's had 30 carries, 92 yards, 0 touchdowns through the air or on the ground this year against Seattle in those two games. That last game in week 18, only 8 attempts. That was his fewest on the season. So it'll be an interesting one, but especially you take Kittle out now too. I think Juszczyk will help it, but it's just such a good run defense. And CMC, like, he's been amazing this year, especially in terms of like fantasy and his volume and that sort of thing. But he's not like posting the greatest efficiency numbers on the ground. It's not really his fault fully, but their running game, it's not like just because they have CMC that it's been amazing this season.
No, not at all. It's just been a very hit or miss, up and down run game. They've had some moments, but not a ton that they've been able to stack together. And even in the passing game here, you mentioned it, like, the run defense is great. The pass defense is really good overall, and particularly limiting production to outside wide receivers. Since week 11, they've allowed just under 70 yards per game. It's the third fewest when you're looking at outside receivers. So, yeah, it would definitely help if Ricky Pearsall played. He had 108 yards against this team all the way back in week number 1. That would be great. But, shoot, we can't really count on him at this point, and even Juwan Jennings might not have a ton of production to gather in this game. Let's talk about when the Seahawks have the ball here. One thing we have to watch out for, apparently Sam Darnold is questionable with an oblique injury. He says he's going to play, so don't know that it's a big risk of him missing the game, but certainly something to keep an eye on as he's coming into a playoff game here pretty banged up in terms of the oblique injury.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Hadn't heard anything about it. An oblique would affect the quarterback a little bit more in terms of just that rotation and everything, throwing the ball. So it'll be an interesting one to watch because I do like this matchup in general. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You were talking about San Francisco's defense earlier, and Salah, great job for, the players he's got on the field. But since week 6, specifically when Fred Warner went down, they've been 25th per play, 27th against the pass, 25th on the ground. So it's been not nearly as good with all of those injuries since that point. They have had some games where they've looked pretty impressive, especially considering who's on the field. But overall, the numbers still not the greatest on a per play basis, even though they played Seattle well last time.
No, and I do think that it's just certain types of you gotta if you're Salah right now, you almost kind of have to just play, which is ironic because he doesn't have any hair. You almost kind of have to play with your hair on fire here as a defense. You've got to fly around. You've got to throw some blitzes out. There have been a ton, and Salah's not a guy that throws a ton of blitzes out, but there have been game plans specifically without Bosa and Warner, both those guys, where they have thrown a lot of blitzes out. And obviously with Sam Darnold, certain types of pressures, sim pressures, especially creepers, stuff like that he can have some trouble with. Maybe we'll see some of that in this game. But even so, to me, it just comes down to can they deal with Jackson Smith and Jigba? And I think the answer to that is probably no. In terms of since week 11, they're kind of 15th in the NFL in terms of yards allowed to slot and outside receivers. So there's not it's screaming a ton of just green light matchups here. But I just think personnel-wise, they do not have the horses in the secondary to hang with this guy. So I imagine it's going to be a pretty big funnel targets to Jackson Smith and Jigba type night.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. That is one of my props that I have. Even though Seattle's offense hasn't been the greatest the last 2 games, and they haven't necessarily needed to throw too much, Smith and Jigba's still kind of gotten his. He's gotten 80-ish receiving yards. So his line's at 94.5 right now. So it'll be interesting to watch. But one, I was going to ask you, do you have any worries of Sam Darnold in the playoffs just going off of last year in his one game? Is there any concerns of that kind of narrative?
I mean, how could you not have a little bit of a worry, right? I mean, it's just I see. To me, I don't know if it's so much as Sam Darnold in the playoffs. I do think it's just Sam Darnold against certain type, or let me say, not playoffs specifically, but big games, right? Because that's been a thing with him where people think in big games, big moments, spotlight moments, he'll have those bad performances. That doesn't necessarily always track if you're looking at whatever, quote, big games are. Obviously, the playoffs are the biggest games of them all. And that to me is less of the concern and more of just it's the specific type of defenses that can give him trouble. And this is one of those ones where if Salah just throws a lot on his plate, I could see it being one of those moments. So good news sounds like Charles Cross, the left tackle, is going to return for Seattle. That obviously matters for Sam Darnold. More pass protection is better. And I think that's just the key here. If they can block it up, if they send blitzes and extra pressure, the Niners just can't get home with 4. That's the thing. They don't have enough pass rush juice. Shoot, even last week, they pressure Jalen Hurts on 6 dropbacks throughout the entire game. That if they repeat that performance this week, I think Sam can actually have a pretty good game here.
Yeah. The 2 things that I guess I thought of while you were talking is just one, when you mentioned Robert Saleh, maybe a positive that they've already played twice in terms of just getting that more reps against that specific defense. And the other thing is just going back to last year, I guess, with the Vikings, very different offensive attacks. Minnesota is always going to be super pass heavy with O'Connell, whereas this Seattle team, they run more than anybody in the NFL. So a little bit less on his plate. Maybe that helps. So has a little less opportunities in terms of the passing game, but can capitalize on those big ones. Less on his play in terms of they're going to run Walker and Charbonnet a bunch.
All right, speaking of the run game, let's get to the props here, and I'll start us off because spoiler alert, I have a lot of conviction that Seattle's going to win this game, but I don't have a lot of conviction. And actually, by the way, I think they win it handedly. I'd actually lay the 7 points here and take Seattle -7. So I'm confident in that, but I'm not really confident in how they're going to get that production. I'm not quite sure where it goes on San Francisco's side or Seattle's side. The one that I thought is interesting, Kenneth Walker over 70.5 yards from scrimmage, so rushing and receiving yards combined. And Joel, the main reason for this is since week 11, the Niners are 31st in rushing success rate allowed, and they've allowed the third most yards per game to receivers out of the backfield, 43.6 yards per game. I'm just looking for a couple of explosive plays from Kenneth Walker, and I think he goes over the 70.5 combined rushing receiving yards.
Yeah, I like that. I love my success rate stats. So when you're talking about them being 31st since that mark, specifically against a team like Seattle, who if you are giving up 5 yards a play, that sort of thing against the run, they're going to keep running and it builds on top of each other. So I think he can definitely be set up for a good volume day.
No doubt. One last dance with the devil with the Seahawks running backs. Why not do it? Okay,
Yeah.
What do you got from a prop perspective in this one? You've got 3, so you're picking up the slack for me.
Yeah, we'll go quick because JSN talked about it, 94.5. I think he goes over that. And then the two that are kind of paired together going to be with Kittle, like we talked about earlier. Going to miss this game. We're not betting his over. But CMC and Tonjes, their receiving yards, so not on the ground for CMC, but just purely receiving yards. Tonjes is at 35.5. CMC is at 47.5. In the 8 games that Kittle's been hurt, CMC has crossed that mark in 7 of those 8 games. Tonjes in each of his last 4 games that he started for George Kittle. So we're looking by position, like you're talking about earlier. Good against those outside receivers. They're fourth best against receivers, 16th purely average against those tight ends, 22nd to running backs through the air. There's been a little bit of a weakness here and there throughout the season. Great against the ground, great on the goal line. But those running backs out of the backfield, that's kind of when they've been exploited at some times. And CMC's had some good games against them through the air in those regular seasons. So I like both of their overs in the receiving game. Expect that volume to be there for them.
I like it. I like how those two play off of each other as well. I think Tonjes can play a little bit too. I don't know if he's like a future superstar or anything, but he's obviously flashed a little bit for the San Francisco 49ers when they have not had George Kittle, as they won't in this game. So, Joel, I think it's going to be Seahawks, and I think they win by at least more than 7 points. What do you think? You going Niners or Seahawks here?
I'll go Seattle. I think I'm confident in Seattle with the San Francisco defense right now and how these games have gone. I would say I would take the spread, though, for San Francisco, though. 7 points. It's a lot.
Okay.
I feel like their offense has been, outside of playing Seattle, pretty good as an offense. So I like them to keep it close at the end of the game here. Purdy to step up when they need him. So I would say +7 for San Fran, even though I would say Seattle's going to win.
All right, I like it. We're going to take our first quick break. When we come back, we're going to break down the 2 other games in the divisional round. We'll get into that right after this. All right, we're back. Let's talk through the two games from Sunday of the divisional round here. First game up, we've got the number 5 seed Houston Texans going to face the second seed New England Patriots. The Patriots are 3-point home favorites. We got a 40.5-point over under. And this game, to me, Joel, is fascinating. I think this is going to be a very low scoring game. So my first instinct is take the under on 40.5 points here. I don't know about you, but I'm going to have a lot of trench talk in this game. I got a lot of offensive line, pass rush notes here for these two teams because I think that's really where this game is going to be won or lost. But when we talk about when the Houston Texans have the ball here, what do you have your eye on when Houston's on offense?
The main thing I would say is just CJ Stroud's rushing. I've seen it all week from Texans fans how he had 0 rushing yards last week. We'll see different times where he didn't look too comfortable in the pocket last week. And he doesn't really take off and run when there are lanes there. He will usually settle for throwing it 10, 15 yards downfield into contested coverage rather than taking the easy 5 to 10 yards on the ground. So I'd say that's a big factor against the Patriots defense where in those regular season games, he's crossed 40 yards 2 out of 46 games. He's done it 2 out of 5 games in the playoffs. So a little bit more in the playoffs, but like I said in the wild card round, 0 rushing yards. Part of that may be because him coming back from injury, but I would say that'd be an X factor in this one is can CJ Stroud get a little bit more on the ground this week?
And you and I were talking about this earlier. The funny thing about this is like a long-standing thing with CJ Stroud is this has always been the guy can clearly pick up positive plays with his legs. He just is so reticent to do it. Like it's very interesting. But the other thing that's weird about this is typically we think, oh, quarterback doesn't take off and run. The running back is catching a lot of passes. These Texans backs aren't getting involved in the passing game at all, Joel, even though that was supposed to be Woody Marks' thing coming out of college.
Yeah, he's projected. I'm sure he went into Houston thinking he's going to get a lot of receiving with Nick Chubb being there as his counterpart. But yeah, nothing right now. He'll get 1 target a game. And usually when, like you said, they're not scrambling, they'll check down a little bit. Stroud just throws 2 receivers down the field, which I kind of love in terms of the passing attack. But yeah, in terms of receiving for Woody Marks, in terms of his rushing, it's a little different. Woody Marks usually getting 25 touches, 24 of them are carries.
Few things to watch for here in the passing game because I do think Woody Marks can maybe not fully replicate, but that was probably the best game of his season last week against the Steelers in the wild card round. And the Patriots do rank 30th in rushing success rate allowed since week 11. So if you got to kind of throw out last week because the Chargers are such a mess, but that's definitely something to pay attention to here is can Woody Marks have another big game. The other two things to look at here when Houston's trying to throw the ball, number one, we'll almost certainly not be getting Nico Collins in this game. He is not at practice today. This is his second documented concussion of the year. He's not going to play. So that's going to be on the outside. Jaden Higgins, Xavier Hutchinson. That's not great.
Jalen Noel in the slot.
Yeah, Jalen Noel in the slot. Christian Kirk having a big game last week. Everybody, by the way, if you look at the odds on his unders, it's like under 4.5 catches is minus 155. So people are not believing in the rebound here, an encore for Christian Kirk, and that kind of makes sense. If you look at the Patriots secondary, 48 yards per game allowed to slot receivers since week 11. That is the third fewest. 70.9 yards per game allowed to outside receivers since week 11. That's the fourth fewest. They don't give up a ton of production. And obviously last week they really got it going against the Chargers, who have a ton of issues here. But Christian Gonzalez, he is in the concussion protocol, but he sounds like he's closer to playing than Nico Collins is. And even without Gonzalez, if it's Gonzalez against like Jaden Higgins and freaking Xavier Hutchinson, forget about it, man. Like the Texans are not getting a pass game going in that situation.
Yeah, injuries are huge for them right now, but in a good way for the Patriots. You see on the screen, didn't allow a catch last week, Christian Gonzalez. A lot of the times when they've been bad against receivers this year, it was when Christian Gonzalez was missing games. He's back healthy now. He's been great. Like we were talking about since week 11, those stats. Milton Williams, another one, that star defensive tackle, killed Justin Herbert last week. He finally got back healthy. They were really struggling on the ground for a while. Milton Williams comes back, and Chargers offensive line's not the greatest. I know that. But Milton Williams made an impact similar for the Texans here, that offensive line play. Can they do better than at least the Chargers did?
Maybe, but here's the thing and I think the Texans offensive line is better and it's improved. There's no question about that. But they still have their issues in pass protection, specifically with a lot of the things that New England threw out last week. The Texans have struggled with when defenses have used stunts against them each of the last 2 years. Last year, I believe it was CJ Stroud and Caleb Williams lost the most yards on sacks when facing stunts last year. This year, the Texans have improved to losing the 7th most yards on sacks when the defense uses a stunt. So not that great. And that's a lot of what they did last week. The Patriots were using a ton of stunts in games up front. 67% pressure rate according to Fantasy Points data when using stunts last week for New England against the Chargers. They got 2 sacks. Herbert avoided 2 other sacks. He had 2 completions for 15 yards in that situation. So that's another reason why I think this Texans passing game might struggle. But when we flip it over to New England has the ball, I think this, Joel, also is a line of scrimmage matchup here because Will Campbell, I think he's going to be a really good player. I think he was really good to start his rookie season. I'm not 100% sure how healthy he is right now. I think they might have kind of rushed him back because it's playoffs, baby. Like, let's go. We got to have our best players out there. He is a really good player. He really struggled to me with power. He struggled just generally. Next Gen Stats notes that Will Campbell allowed a team-high 6 pressures last week, including 2 sacks on 40 pass blocking snaps in the win against the Chargers. His 4th career game allowing multiple sacks. And now you're telling me he's got to face Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson? That makes me a little nervous coming into this game.
Yeah, Houston's defense is legit. They have the pressure up front. They have the secondary to go with it. In terms of just passing yards, this is why I think it's just a huge game for Henderson and Stevenson if they can get something on the ground. Houston, taking out the Week 18 game when they're resting some starters, the highest a quarterback has had in passing yards this year is 235 yards, and that was the Cardinals' Jacoby Brissett when they were getting blown out, and the Texans had 40 points on offense. Nobody's had over 235 against them. So Drake May's been incredible, and I believe in him. But it's just like, man, this Texans defense is legit. A lot of this rushing attack for New England just kind of goes as their explosives have gone. So when Stevenson and Harrison are not getting those, then it kind of struggles a little bit. When it is, they have those big plays and their offense gets cooking. But I just don't know if that's going to happen this week against this Houston defense.
Well, don't worry. The Texans are, 3rd best rushing success rate allowed since week 11. They don't give up a ton of production to receivers out of the backfield either. So this is what I'm saying. Like, I think right now I just trust Drake May more than I trust CJ Stroud, and that's the reason why I'm gonna pick the Patriots here. But this to me just screams a lot of low scoring games, a lot of low scoring lines here, which translates us to our props here because you've got one here that you're taking the under on one of the quarterbacks.
Yeah, just what we talked about earlier with Stroud. I just don't believe it's going to fully come together here, even though I had that playoff stat where he has been running a little bit more in the playoffs. Since his Week 9 concussion, he missed more than 2 or 3 games with that. It wasn't just like a 1-week concussion injury. Yeah. So he missed a decent amount of time when Davis Mills was coming in there. Since that point, he has not hit this 12.5-yard rushing mark one time. 0 yards last week. Hasn't been running, and the Houston offense has just been rushing a lot more. Before the injury, they were 25th in run calls, 4th since. So it's completely flipped in just how they're calling this offense since Stroud has been back. So I don't think it's going to be there in terms of the volume and his dropbacks and his scrambles and everything, and don't know if this will be finally be the day where he kind of wakes up and starts running downfield a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And we'll kind of continue the CJ Stroud under party here because one of my props is CJ Stroud under 207.5 passing yards here, minus 115. Number one, I've got protection questions in terms of Milton Williams dominating the game on the interior. And I've got questions about Jaden Higgins and Xavier Hutchinson being the outside receivers going against these great Patriots cornerbacks. I'm just not very optimistic. The Patriots play the 5th most man coverage since week 11. I don't think they have anybody without Nico Collins who could beat man coverage on the outside. So I think it's going to be a slow day for the Houston passing attack. One guy I do think could have some success in this matchup is Stephon Diggs. I've got the over on 4.5 receptions here. The Texans defense is great. You highlighted how they have not allowed more than 231 passing yards to any quarterback, which is incredible. But they do give up 82.5 receiving yards per game to slot receivers since week 11. That's the 7th most. And you see this again sometimes with these great defenses. They limit explosive plays to the outside. They will seed some underneath stuff to the slot. And Stephon Diggs is primarily, I mean, he's playing a ton right now. You wouldn't notice it because of the production last week, but ran a route on 85% of the dropbacks. He was 50-50 in terms of slot outside. I think he'll get some quick hitters with this one here. So, all right. We've got a lot of questions in terms of how points are going to be scored in this one, Joel. Who's winning this game? I've already said I'm going to take the Patriots in a low-scoring game here.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Patriots, and I'll take them to cover, mainly just because of me doubting this offense. I love you pointing out the man coverage stat with no Nico Collins. And Diggs also, very notable that he is running a lot more routes. Does this count as a revenge game for him? I feel like they ended on good terms last year. But maybe a revenge game versus Houston, kind of. But I'll go the Patriots.
That's a good point. Like, is this a revenge game? Because if you guys remember when Diggs was traded to the Patriots, Nick Caserio kind of did him a solid and voided the rest of his contract. So, like, he was originally on a big extension, and they just for whatever reason, voided the rest of that contract so he could walk at the end of the year. And that's why he's playing with the Patriots, and Drake May and Weiss had this kind of career rebirth with them. So, I don't know if it's a revenge game or not, and not sure I really want to get into the mindset of Diggs all the time either. So, all right, let's go to the final game of the weekend here. 6:30 p.m. Eastern. We've got the 5-seed Rams going to take on the 2-seed Bears in Chicago. 48.5 point over under. The Rams are 3.5 point favorites, and I'll say this to start off, Joel. Really interesting point I found on these two teams. Both of these two teams throughout the course of the season are first and second in terms of yards allowed over the middle of the field, the short and deep middle of the field since week 11. Bears are first by a lot, and then Rams are second by a lot before the third place team there. So this lines up anecdotally when I watch these two teams. Both defenses give up a lot of big plays over the middle of the field, which is great because both of these offenses love to attack over the middle of the field. On the season, the Rams have the 4th most passing yards on over the middle throws. The Bears are 6th most. So that 48.5 point over under, despite the fact this is going to be a cold game, I think this is the game we see a lot of offense here.
Yeah, I love those call out. A perfect stat to go with that, Harmon. Guess who's also number 1 and number 2 in play action rate on offense? Ben Johnson and Sean McVay. Very well pairs with that middle of the field. Great for Puka Nacua. Great for Colston Loveland. It is going to be like freezing temperatures, but I like the potential of this one, especially like the games they've given us, especially the Bears. Like we were talking last week, the Bears keeps getting in these close games, and they always pull it out, so I'll take the Bears to win. And I was like, it's 21-3. This doesn't look too good. And then they won. These games have been incredible that Chicago's have been in, and Los Angeles too.
No doubt. We're seeing this right now here from Noah Berggren. Could be one of the coldest NFL and Chicago Bears games on record this Sunday when the Rams come to the Windy City. AI Euro model spitting, I don't know what that means, spitting out wind chills of 0 to minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit mid-afternoon Sunday with air temps for a high maybe in the 10 to 15 degree Fahrenheit range. Wind gusts 20 to 30 miles an hour seem likely. Not going to be snowing, but that's going to be very cold there for those LA boys. I know I used to live in LA. I don't anymore. Joel, you're still in LA, so I don't know. You could tell me what you think these Rams players are going to be doing in terms of this cold.
All right, I'm from Indiana, so I'm used to it.
That's true.
I will say the main factor here in terms of like how it affects football, in terms of playing, especially in the NFL, like they have so much stuff to keep warm. The cold affects it a little bit, not a ton. The bigger one here will be that wind. You see it at the end, the wind gusts potentially getting to 20 to 30 miles per hour. It's usually about that 15 mile per hour mark where it affects the passing game. So if it is like 25, I would care more about that than it being like 0 degrees. They have the coats, the massive Tom Brady coats. They got the double hand warmers. They can do that play in, play out, and maybe it lowers the point total by like a couple. But the wind is the one to watch out for.
That makes me nervous because I've got a lot of overs when we get to the props here. But one matchup I'm certainly looking at when the Rams have the ball is Devontae Adams versus the outside corners here for the Bears. The Bears have given up you'd expect. We read off the stats about the over the middle passes. A lot of that has actually come to outside receivers. They allow 96.4 yards per game to outside receivers, but they also give up 85 yards per game to slot receivers since week 11. That's the fourth most. So I do think they'll try to get Devontae Adams going, but I expect more of it to come on those over the middle plays here. 13 targets for Adams last week. That is definitely something to monitor. The other thing here is the Rams are an elite rushing team. You had a bunch of great stats about that last week. That came to fruition where they had some efficient moments against the Panthers. This is another defense you can run on here. The Bears are 27th in rushing success rate allowed since week 11. So I do expect the Rams running backs to be pretty involved here.
Yeah, both Kyron, both Corum and Kyron, both I like them. Again, this week, so I'd expect a lot of them. They've been pretty consistently getting like close to 15 carries each. So basically 50-50 right now in that backfield. So I'd expect them to step up. Terrence Ferguson's going to be back, so maybe a little bit more 13 personnel this week, even though Adams is back. So it'll be interesting to see how they implement everybody because they're getting healthy, and so is the Chicago secondary too. So a little bit better on both sides.
And flipping to when the Bears have the ball here, because you mentioned that Bears secondary, we'll see what they're able to do there. The Rams secondary is a problem. And I've been bringing this up now for about a month, and we saw it come to fruition last week against the Panthers, where Jalen Coker balled out. Tedero McMillan had some good moments here. And that really showed what the issue is with this Rams secondary. It's very much the outside corners here because where the Bears are kind of tight in terms of production allowed to slot versus outside targets, the Rams, they only allow 38 yards per game to slot receivers since week 11. That's the second fewest, but they allow 113.6 yards per game to outside receivers. That's the seventh most. And they also average almost 43 yards per game allowed to receivers out of the backfield. So they do a pretty good job of limiting those slot targets to the Rams, but you can get them for these big plays on the outside. Specifically, you mentioned this, when they face play action. This is a great stat from Sam Brockes over at Sumer Sports. The Bears go under center at the fifth highest rate in the league, and they run play action second highest rate, as you mentioned. The Bears they're great when they run play action. They like to attack downfield. The Rams defense has really struggled against play action on the whole this year, ranking 28th since week 13th. And Caleb Williams has had a higher catchable throw rate when using play action, and Rome Odunze has almost a 27% target share on those plays. And that does line up to me like the way they use Rome on those big in breakers, the traditional drop back stuff when they get into play action. I think they'll be pretty. I actually think Rome might be in line for a good game here. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But yeah, I like the way that the Bears, how they play on offense through the air. If the wind can cooperate, I actually think that they can have some success throwing the football here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because they don't really use the outside receivers as much lately. A lot of it because, Odunze was hurt, but also the running backs, like you pointed out. They haven't been throwing to Swift too much. Roman Nunn guy out of the backfield too often. Their running back target share is like bottom 5 in the NFL. So it'll be interesting to see what they kind of attack this Rams defense with. And point out, a lot of people still think, and I wouldn't say they're bad, but a lot of people still see the Rams defense as like this really good defense. The first 12 weeks of the season, number 1 in scoring defense. Since week 13, counting the playoffs, 26th. And it wasn't like they were playing like these elite offenses. It was like the Panthers twice, the Falcons, the Cardinals twice, 26th in scoring defense. So against the Bears offense, it's been great. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
No doubt. And even Colson Loveland, who obviously balled out last week, they will do some things where they line him up as the isolated farthest outside wide receiver. So he could even be able to benefit from this matchup here as well. But with that, let's move into some of our props and close this game out here. Joel, what are you looking at when you've got some props here for this game?
We're going to start off on the Bears offense, just like we were talking about. Caleb Williams to have 2 touchdowns at plus money, plus 115, just to be over 1.5 passing touchdowns. If we look back, just very simple, his last 6 games, he's had 2 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns, 2, 2, 2, and 2. Every single week, it's just 2 touchdowns at a time. This offense has been very consistent to go along with that. I think they do put up that 25 to 30 points on offense. So I like Williams there, especially at the plus money. And then going, it's kind of the same thing, but technically two different ones. Tyler Higbee and or Colby Parkinson, both at under 2.5 receptions right now. The idea here is with Devontae Adams back last week, they ran a ton of 11 personnel, one or three receivers, one tight end, one running back, compared to what they had been doing without Devontae Adams and just in the second half of the season, way more than they have any time recently. A lot more of that. And then now with other Ferguson, Terrence Ferguson back at tight end, that kind of mixes in things as well. He's had 4 targets in each of his last 2 games. That was a career high, back-to-back games, just having those 4 targets. So Parkinson and Higbee already weren't getting too much targets each game. It's very spread out. And with Adams back healthy now, Ferguson back healthy, I doubt that they're going to hit those 3 reception marks.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Just spread that wealth at the tight end position, and with Adams being there, that's a good call as well. My props here kind of fall along a similar line. Number one, I'm going Caleb Williams over 221 and a half passing yards here, minus 115. We both like the Bears passing game here. I will note, I mentioned Rome Odunze. People must be betting up the overs on Rome Odunze here, because the over on 2.5 catches is minus 145. And the over under on receiving yards, which is pretty low, it's 33.5. It was 32.5, and it was crazy minus like 140, something like that. It's now up a little bit to 33.5 at minus 115. So I'm going to put that on the board here. I think Rome gets at least 34 receiving yards in this game. Puka Nacua also 97.5 receiving yards. I'll take the over on that for some of those over the middle stats we highlighted earlier. Joel, I think the Bears win this game. What do you think?
I have the Rams winning this game just because I trust in their offense so much in this spot. Chicago, bottom 3 in pressure right now. That's kind of how you beat Stafford. So with them back healthy, everyone on offense, and I would say overall pretty solid matchup for them. Stafford playing at the MVP level. I would say the Rams right now in the cover.
That's probably the correct pick, but I don't know. I just got a feeling
we'll see.
Bears can have some success in this one. All right, we are going to take our last break. When we come back, Joel is going to riff on his daily fantasy lineup for the week. We'll get into that right after this. All right, we're back. And Joel, listen, It's not enough for the people with these prop bets. It's not enough to just watch some good football games. They also want to play a little bit of daily fantasy here. So if you're playing daily fantasy on Yahoo this weekend during the divisional playoff rounds, let's give the people a lineup here with some options for them to take a look at.
I do love fantasy. I love daily fantasy a ton. We're going to stick with that Bears and Rams game. 3 Bears in this stack, and it's pretty cheap. So that's the main thing. Colson Loveland, most expensive tight end, but similar to Kittle last week. It didn't work, the Kittle injury. But not too much more expensive than any other tight end. And his ceiling has been 3 straight games in a row. Incredible. Burden, along with it, super cheap. We talked about that over the middle passing defense and topping off with Caleb Williams at quarterback. And going Blake Corum on the other side at running back, I think it's the worst misprice in this slate. Kyron Williams is $29. Blake Corum is $14. And the past month or so, Blake Corum has been getting a few less touches per game, still gets just as much at the goal line. So I would just take the cheap guy in Blake Corum. Hope he does well against this Bears defensive front. Other guys, we're going to go RJ Harvey. We talked a lot about him earlier against this Buffalo team. This Buffalo defense has been struggling on the ground. RJ Harvey has been a top 12 running back in fantasy ever since he took over as a starter. That goal line work, amazing. Receiving, a little bit inconsistent, but it's still there for potential. And especially when he is getting the catches, usually they're not like 3 or 4 yard catches. They're, 10, 15 yard catches. So I like that there. And we talked a lot about Jackson Smith and Jigba as well. Hasn't had a touchdown against San Fran this year. Still would say overall a good matchup. I would expect them to use him a lot in this first playoff game. So love Jackson Smith and Jigba. Obviously the ceiling is there for him any week. So we'll take JSN at a little cheaper price, actually by a decent bit when we're comparing it to Puka Nacua. 2 other empty spots for you, filled out, but I will say lots of money left. I left you guys $26 for that other receiver and flex play. And then the final one down here, the Patriots defense. We played it last week, and it worked against that Chargers front. Very similar story here with Houston. Milton Williams, that defensive front, and the Patriots killed that Chargers offensive line. I wouldn't be shocked if it was the same against that Houston offensive line. CJ Stroud had a lot of happy feet against that Steelers game, and TJ Watt, those 3 turnovers, one of them being the touchdown. So really like it here for that Patriots defense and their opportunity.
I'm going to be honest with you, pal. I see the 26 remaining average for these 2. I don't know how you're going to fill that. There's not a lot of great plays, I think, this week. So maybe you could even get spicy and go real cheap with one and spend up for a Puka Nacua. I mean, damn, CMC is $40. That's
I know.
Interesting. Can't quite get there, but you could potentially
half PPR. I don't love it.
No, yeah, I highlighted Kenneth Walker as maybe like a guy who could have an explosive day here. He might be worth the consideration. And yeah, even though I do think Odunze is going to have a nice game here, Burden projects pretty similarly too, and he runs a lot of when he runs the right routes, he runs a lot of those over the middle routes too, and we know that he can take it to the distance with just 1 or 2 catches. So I like this lineup a lot. I think it gives the people a lot of flexibility, even though, like I said, you look at those flex plays in the $26 range, not a lot of interesting ones. So again, maybe you spend up for one and try to find a cheapy dart throw type play for the other option there. All right, Joel, this was awesome. Great preview show. Hope you have a good divisional round, man. Like I said, I'm very excited for these 4 games. I hope you are as well.
Yeah, very, very pumped. Good talking with you as always.
No doubt. All right, that's going to do it for our show here today, but we will be back on Monday. This is the great Scott Pianowski joins me to recap the weekend's actions. That's going to be right here live at 11 a.m. Eastern on Monday morning on this YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe so you can get that video as soon as it goes up. Until then, we are out.